back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and we are talking about some new legendary creatures coming out here in March of the Machine. So, as usual, I like to talk about the commanders because that's incredibly impactful for the commander format. And I'm going to be talking about a whole bunch of these new partner. I can't really use the term partner, but we're combining legendary creatures. And, you know, there's been a little bit of harumphing about this. You know, at the end of the day, for me, the one issue I have with it is the laziness a little bit with the commander design. I don't really care so much about, this Thalia's riding the Gitrog monster, you know, whatever. I'm sure they have an explanation for it. But for me, it's more like I was a little critical of Phyrexian All Will Be One I thought they were getting a little lazy with the commander design. This, again, feels a little lazy because they're just taking an ability of one legendary creature with an ability of another one, and they're just combining them, right? So in a way, it's almost like partner commanders, sort of. I mean, it's a little bit different, but I guess let's find out. Let's take a look at some of these cards. And we're going to start out with maybe the most silly named card ever here, because we're taking two legendary creatures with really silly names and we're combining them. Borborygmos and Fblthp. 2 blue, green, and a red. And of course, originally Borborygmos was Gruul and Fblthp was mono blue. So that's the colors we have here. Cyclops Homunculus. Really funny creature type even. A lot of really funny things going on here. It's a 6/5, so it's a big boy. Whenever Borborygmos and Fblthp enter the battlefield or attack, draw a card. Then you may discard any number of land cards. Oh wow, there's already a lot you can build around here. When you discard one or more cards this way, Borborygmos and Fblthp deal twice that much damage to target creature. Wow, that's a good ability. I mean, 5 mana. We have an ETB ability here, though, which is very easy to abuse. You have blue. Blue does blinking really, really well. You know, Conjurer's Closet, Thassa Deep Dwelling. There's lots of options for that. I've gotten some grief about not reading these cards correctly, so let's go over it again. Whenever Borborygmos or Fblthp enters the battlefield or attacks, so you have the attack trigger as well, draw a card, then you may discard any of the land cards. So what you can do here is you can have your commander ETB and then haste enabler, and you have a discard here, right? You can only discard land cards, so you can't discard your anger, but it would probably behoove you to put other discard outlets in this deck because you likely want to be doing that. So anyway, just discard an anger into your graveyard or any haste enabler. Lightning Greaves, you can attack right away, so you will get 2 triggers immediately, right? And this, keep in mind, then you may discard any number of land cards. You don't have to do any of that. What you can do is have your commander enter the battlefield, draw a card, and then immediately attack and draw another card. That on its own is pretty good. That's pretty good, right? We're in teamer colors here, right? So whenever you discard one or more cards this way, so you can only discard land cards, and when you discard cards that way, this creature is going to deal twice that much damage to target creature. So even just discarding 1 land card is going to deal 2 damage to a creature. That's pretty good, right? And obviously, if you have that Borborygmos deck, the original one, you know, man, how many people are going to take their Borborygmos deck and just be like, I think I'll add blue. I think I'll add blue and turn it into this, because you're already doing that. Like, you would obviously have to make adjustments, but you're already doing the discard land theme, and anyone can very easily go look at those big Borborygmos decks and take a look at what they're doing and just do the same things here, right? We got more, though. Pay 1 and a blue. Put Borborygmos and Fblthp into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. So there's the sort of Fblthp ability, right? That's interesting. You're going to put it into owner's library, 3rd from the top. Sort of is it worth it to? I would say it's probably worth it to put it into your library, 3rd from the top after you've cast it. So casting it once, 5 mana, casting it twice, 7 mana. That's a lot. So it might be worth it. You know, especially if you have a lot of looting. If you have a lot of looting, which you probably will in this deck. I mean, the interesting thing is here, you can attack with your commander and in response to the draw trigger, put it 3rd from the top in your library. But I don't know if that's going to accomplish anything. But you can have a lot of looting in this deck. So looting is obviously going to work with what you're doing in the deck already. Anything to do with draw triggers, discard triggers, as usual, is going to be great here. Surly Badgersaur is going to be fantastic because every time you discard a land, you get a treasure, right? So that seems pretty good. A lot of support here in this. I think probably I would put it third from the top rather than having to pay 7. So I think I would probably use that ability right out of the gate because 7 is a lot of mana. So I think, I think I could wait a couple turns to get my commander. And again, any looting or drawing or whatever is going to get you to your commander a lot faster. The only issue here, you got to be careful. If your opponent can force you to shuffle your library, you can get pretty screwed here, right? Whenever your commander changes zones, you have the option of putting it in the command zone. However, if you've already put it into your library, it's not changing zones if you shuffle your library, right? So if your opponent does something that forces you to shuffle your library, and there's lots of ways to do that, it's not third from the top anymore. It might be right at the bottom. And also what they can do is Ghost Quarter you or Path to Exile or something like that. And if you forget that your commander is third from the top, I've seen lots of people do this. I've seen people Vampiric Tutor, put something on the top or something like that, and then they get Ghost Quartered or Path to Exile. They go search for a land, and then they're like, oh, I just shuffled that card back into my library. You could do this here too, right? I mean, if they're nice. Honestly, even if you're nice in your play group, you really can't undo that. Once you've shuffled your library, that's not something you can undo. So once you start shuffling, you really can't undo that, right? Because you've now changed the order of your library. So yeah, you're just pretty much screwed there. Really great commander though. Obviously there's a ton you can do here. You're drawing, you're discarding, lands theme, teamer colors as well. I think there's a lot of people that are going to take their Borborygmos deck and just add blue and use this as a commander. Moving on though, let's talk about Zirgo and Ojutai. So of course, Zirgo Helm Smasher, right? I guess there's 2 Zirgos. There's the mono red one as well. Oh wait, no, it's not Zirgo Helm Smasher because Zirgo Helm Smasher is black. So this is the original Zirgo because this is a Jeskai commander, 2 blue, red, and white. And Ojutai is white blue. I imagine that's the one, right? So this is going to be the mono red Zirgo. Yeah, I mean, for the colors to make sense anyway. Orc Dragon 4/4, Flying Haste. Zirgo and Ojutai has hexproof as long as it's entered the battlefield this turn. So that's kind of neat how they did that because it is the combination of sort of the Ojutai ability of having hexproof if it's untapped, and I think the Zirgo ability, the dash ability of the Zirgo. Whenever one or more dragons you control deal combat damage to a player or battle, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. You may return one of those dragons to owner's hand. So you're very much in Dragon Tribal here, right? I guess I have to talk about the battle reference here. And again, I don't know entirely what it means, but what this essentially means, I believe, is that we have a new card type called a battle that you can attack, just like you can attack a Planeswalker. I'm not going to get into my personal opinions about it, but now on a battlefield, we can have players that you can attack, Planeswalkers you can attack, and battles that you can attack. But whatever. So damage to a player or battle. So in other words, if you deal damage to a player, you get this trigger. If you deal damage to a battle, you will also get this trigger, right? So that's what it's talking about there. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Again, that's essentially the Ojutai ability. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. You may return one of those dragons to its owner's hand. Of course, this ability is referencing one or more dragons, so it doesn't actually have to be your commander, although that, considering your commander is flying in haste, it's going to be pretty easy to do that. It can be any dragon dealing damage. And then you can return one of those dragons to owner's hand. That's interesting. I wonder why you would want to do that. Again, that's maybe a flavor thing with Zirgo's ability, the dash ability. So yeah, you may return them to your hand. You certainly could build around that. Any dragon with a decent ETB would be great here. It has to be you are returning one of those dragons, which means one of the dragons you control that dealt combat damage. So you can't just return any dragon here. I believe you have to return the dragon that is connecting, right? You can return your commander to your hand. I mean, it's handy to be able to do that, sure. I can connect with my Zirgo and Ojutai, get the trigger, then return it to my hand. If I want to cast a board wipe so my commander doesn't die, your commander has haste, so that actually does work out well. Obviously, it also has that hexproof as long as it entered the battlefield this turn. So there is that as well. Do you want to be recasting your commander all the time? It costs 5 mana. It's not exactly a 1 mana commander like Zirgo. So I don't know if you want to be doing that. You could. A really funny include here would be Aether Vial. Really powerful card in Magic, but doesn't see a lot of play in Commander. but it would be a really great fit here because you could just set it to 5 and then just use that to put your commander in play repeatedly, right? And it'll have hexproof and you can return it to hand, avoid board wipes. It's interesting considering the ridiculous amount of dragon tribal commanders we have, and especially there's a bunch that are way better than this. I can't see this being super popular, not at all. It's interesting though. All right, Rankle and Torbran. So we are combining Rankle, the mono black commander with the modes, and Torbran, who of course famously probably gets used in the 99 way more than it does as a commander because it fits in almost every deck that has red. I have it in my Brawl deck. So 1 black, black, red fairy dwarf. And that's a heck of a casting cost there, hey? 2 black and 2 red. Fairy dwarf 3/4, flying first strike haste. We got a lot of abilities here. Whenever Rankle and Torbran deals combat damage to a player or battle, again with the battle thing, choose any number. So it's interesting I'm wondering if people are going to build around that at all. I guess if you, obviously if your opponents are playing a battle, you could deal damage to it to get this trigger. Are you going to put battles in your deck just so that you can deal damage to them? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how many battles they're going to have, obviously, but let's see what this card does. Okay, I like Modal. Modal's great. I always love Modal. Here you're choosing any number, just like on Rankle. So each player creates a treasure token. Each player sacrifices a creature. If a source would deal damage to a player or battle this turn, it deals that much damage +2 instead. That's weird. Okay, I'm going to read this card again so I make sure I get it right. When Rankle and Torbran deals combat damage to a player or battle, choose any number. So after it's already dealt damage, if a source would deal damage to a player or battle this turn. So you're in combat, you've already dealt damage in order to get this trigger. So that will not apply to the current damage you're doing, right? Will it? If a source would deal damage, yeah, no, it won't. So that must mean any damage that is done later in the turn. Again, this seems like that seems like an ability where there's going to be some confusion and possibly some players squabbling over whether or not it works. Obviously, it works with anything you're doing later in the turn, but don't think it works with the actual ability, does it? Because the damage has already been dealt. Anyway, moving on. All right, let's talk about Brawl and Kari Zev. So this is the mono blue Brawl, right? The counter spell commander, I guess you could call it. And Kari Zev, of course, which is making those monkeys. And of course, the Ragavan being way more popular than the initial Kari Zev card now, obviously. So 1 blue and a red, human, 2/4, first strike menace. Whenever you cast your first instant, if this is going to, it would be funny if they had, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you make a monkey token or something. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, you may cast a spell with lesser mana value that shares a card type with it from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't create First Mate Ragavan, a legendary 2/1 red monkey pirate creature token, it gains haste until end of turn. Okay, so sort of what I expected, I guess. So 2/4 first strike menace. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, so it's only going to be first, but of course you can do it on everyone else's turn, right? Obviously with the instants, unless you can use flash here like a ley line. You may cast a spell with lesser mana value that shares a card type with it from your hand. So if you cast an instant, it's got to be an instant. If you cast a sorcery, it's got to be a sorcery. You can't mix and match without paying its mana cost. So it's sort of cascade, hey, from your hand. Yeah, that's essentially what's happening here. Really is essentially cascade from your hand with instants and sorceries. Pretty good. Now the issue here is you got to make sure you got something in your hand. You're going to want to get the value off of this ability. So you're going to want to make sure, like, mana values in this deck are going to be important, I think. You're going to want to make sure, like, what I would do if I was building this deck is I would make sure I had a lot of really cheap spells, like a lightning bolt or something. So anything I cast pretty much is going to allow me to cast that lightning bolt for free, which is pretty good. Cantrips might work really good here too. You know, cantrips aren't super fantastic value unless you can be abusing them, right? So, you know, that expedite, whatever, I give my creature haste until end of turn, and then I get to draw a card, right? Having that in my hand just becomes a free card draw. I can also give my creature haste if I use it on my turn, which could be important, but stuff like that's going to probably be it's just good value. I don't love stuff like that in a game typically. Like cantrips are just like, they're so low impact, but if I'm getting them for free, now it's worth it, right? Again, in a feather deck, people do that a lot. In a feather deck, it's worth it because I'm casting it and then I get to do it again and again and again. There, it's actually, I like cards like that. And in here, I think I like cards like that too. So you probably could do the cantrip thing quite a bit here. I'm making sure I am using my commander's ability. I don't want to cast something and then not have something in my hand that's lesser mana value, because then I'm not taking advantage of it. I mean, I guess if you don't, you get to create a monkey token, but that's like, that's okay. And if you already have the monkey token, it's legendary, so you're not going to get another one. So that's like a one-time thing. Like, okay, I create the monkey token. Now every time I cast an instant or sorcery spell, I want to get free value off of it. That's how you're building this deck. Getting that monkey token is just like the one time that you sort of whiff, you get the monkey token, right? That's the only way that I wouldn't be relying on that part too much. I would be more building around that cascade from hand, right? That's essentially what that is. Pretty good. All right, and lastly, today we got a mono green one, Surrak and Goreclaw. So, of course, Goreclaw being the bear makes your big creatures cost less, right? And Surrak does a couple of different things, right? So 4 green human bear, 6/5 with trample. So again, we got a big boy here. Other creatures you control have trample. That makes sense. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains haste until end of turn. So yeah, that's a mono green commander, all right. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a counter on it. Gains haste until end of turn. So this is the Surrak that's giving haste, which I always thought that was a weird commander, because you have this mono green commander that's giving haste. Haste you see in green a little bit, but it's mostly a red ability. I always thought that was a weird commander, and weird that they gave it that ability. Here, yeah, you really are just combining those two creatures' abilities here for the most part. Giving your creatures trample, putting counters on them, giving them haste. You're an attacky theme. Yeah, not too exciting. I mean, mono green on top of it, so I mean, this is very open-ended. One of the good things about this, okay, I'll try to pump this commander up a bit. One of the good things about a very open-ended sort of ability like this is it can sometimes fit a more niche tribe. So Aurochs, for example, I made one of my patrons a Auroch tribal deck. There's only a few of them, but if you wanted to make an Auroch deck, this could be a decent commander, right? I mean, I think some of them already have trample, but giving them trample, giving a certain tribe trample could be really good. I would say worms too, but worms already have, again, we already have a green worm commander now, so you don't really need to do that. They enter the battlefield, they get a counter on them, they gain haste. That can be really good for some tribes. So this could be, 6 is a lot of mana, right? That again, now if I'm building around a certain tribe here, this is going to be like that last ability. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield, which means you're not getting that advantage unless Surrak and Goreclaw are on the battlefield. So this is a commander that I would prefer to get out and then start casting those Aurochs or whatever and getting the advantage off of that. Playing my commander after the fact isn't going to be that great. It's only just going to give my other creatures trample. Not super great. We can all imagine this is probably not likely going to be a very popular commander at all. All right, that is it for today. 5 more pairings or partner up commanders. I don't know if there's some sort of silly lingo that we're using for these, but these are, obviously legendary creatures that have paired together and are sort of combining the abilities. I think it's a little interesting how they take those abilities from those existing cards and sort of combine them in an interesting way. It is kind of interesting, I guess. The flavor's neat. I like the flavor there. Again, you're sort of just seeing the same thing on those cards already. It really is almost, in a lot of cases, like taking those commanders and just using them as partners in the command zone. But there are a little different, and there's some interesting ones here for sure. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. But that's it for today, and thanks for tuning in.